State Representative Tackey Chan of Quincy is on the road today. Tackey, how are you?
Good to see you, Joe. We haven't done one of these in a while where we will take tacky time and tacky talk anywhere we can.
Just to be clear, the car is stationary. You are not driving the motor vehicle at the moment.
We are not. One of the challenges of elected life is that you got to get stuff done when you can get it done, and that includes meetings virtually these days. It's again post-COVID 21st century. You can do work anywhere, as long as someone's willing to put on a video camera. Those of us remember, I mean, used to try to do three-way calling on cell phones or do conference calling through that 800 number. And that's no longer the case we live in. Today, it's about Zoom calls and Microsoft Teams and other ways to communicate. And, reality is you can do it anywhere, anytime, any place. And as people, if you're watching this, see, I'm not in a tie in my car. Those who are listening on the podcast or on the radio, is realizing the fact that this gig is really more 24 hours, seven in some ways than you realize.
No, it's absolutely, and it has changed the way people do business, and it has changed the commercial real estate market in major metropolitan areas such as Boston.
Yeah, especially on commercial landlords who don't need as big a space as they used to, particularly if they're allowing workers to come in to the office, 3 days a week or 2 days a week, or they don't need people to travel as far because all this stuff is remote. Again, depends on the profession, obviously. Some professions still require some in person, for example, doctors and whatnot. I was just at a doctor's appointment, hence I'm in the car with you guys. And I actually have another meeting right after I'm done with you, also on video. So, but it does have an impact on commercial real estate valuations if there's less people using the properties, and that's a problem in particular, more than anywhere else, in particular Boston, where prior to COVID, they had all those brand new office buildings built in South Boston and the Seaport, and now they're not all full. And it has a ripple effect, obviously, when you don't have commercial tenants filling up the facilities. It impacts coffee shops, restaurants, local grocery stores, convenience stores, local clothing stores. Any number of businesses are directly impacted by a lack of commercial tenants. And then I enough remember when Downtown Crossing was a much scarier, nastier place because largely commercial tenants no longer were there.
So, what is going on Beacon Hill this week, Techie?
This Yesterday, the House debated what we now refer to as the Protect Act. Some of you may have seen it in the news fairly recently, and it's the fact that we've been observing a lot of the ICE um, activity around the country, and they are in our neighborhoods. People in Quincy should be aware they are in our neighborhoods too, but has not risen to the level of like a Minnesota situation or Chicago or Los Angeles. That being said, it is very troubling on this issue regarding mass people running around or civilian detentions. And I will remind everybody on the call here that it is not just people who are immigrants, whether documented or undocumented. They have detained U.S. citizens for hours and also detained other people of legal status here. Acting like it's perfectly acceptable. And this is very troubling because I tell people no one is truly safe. If you listen to this call and you think you're safe because you're a citizen or because it's purely racially driven, that is not true. So I give a lot of credit to Dan Cahill, the House Chairman of Public Safety and Homeland Security, as well as Andy Vargas, the representative from Haverhill, who shares the Black Latino Caucus, and of course, all the members of the House who engage in a very deliberative and thoughtful process, with the chair, including myself and the Asian Caucus, to provide some suggestions and things we can do that we believe under state law and federal law we're allowed to do at our level. Obviously, I get a lot of emails in about all kinds of different ideas, of which, frankly, are impractical and most likely will violate federal law. And we're trying to avoid being sued by the federal government by staying in our lane the best we can, while recognizing that there's a limitation of what we can do. So it was a very good debate. I did take the floor and debated yesterday. And we'll see what the Senate does next. A lot of what the governor proposals we threw out the window. Um, didn't make sense in a practical matter. And those who spend any time with me know I don't do false hope. I'm unfortunately for many folks a rather blunt realist, whether you like the answer or not. I'm fairly blunt about what's going on. So in terms of the of where we are in this, it's going to be interesting how it plays out with the Senate and the governor.
Yeah, I mean, if it does pass and become law, do you think it'll be challenged in court?
I think one aspect will be challenged in court probability. So let's do this. Let's tell what it is not. Okay.
Okay.
It is not safe communities. It is not sanctuary cities. Okay. That is what it's not. It also is not us basically treating the borders like a country and we're going to prohibit federal agents from coming in. You'd be surprised how constituents will email claiming that we have some jurisdiction to stop federal people from coming in, much less stop anybody from coming in. I mean, believe it or not, under the U.S. Commerce Clause, residents of this country, not necessarily U.S. citizens, residents has the right of freedom of travel unless you're a prisoner. So, unless there's some kind of restraining thing or you're wearing a, ankle bracelet under probation or you're in prison, we have the freedom of travel. And, the challenge we have in this stuff is supremacy clause. How do we work around it? So, the one aspect we think may get challenged is the courthouses. So you may have seen, not necessarily just in Massachusetts, but other places where IC has disrupted court proceedings by taking defendants and witnesses away and leaving victims behind. And sometimes they take the victim too. It's a very underreported area. And we give a lot more jurisdictional control to courthouses regarding how to manage civil violations. I've talked about this more than once. ICE is not criminal investigatory groups. They have police on their shirts, but they're actually enforcing majority of civil violations. So if you skip your visa for any reason, or you have an administrative error because you filled your paperwork wrong, or you didn't update stuff, that is a civil violation, not a criminal violation. And I think the media does a crappy job explaining this, and political pundits as well as the public is largely misinformed. And you throw in all the rhetoric, it just makes it even worse. So, if you got a judicial warrant, that's a criminal offense. And, every state will honor judicial warrants. And you're supposed to have judicial warrants to break into people's homes because, Fourth Amendment right, search and seizure applies to anybody's property when you're on. So we create a situation where the judiciary has a lot more, even more control over their own properties. It is state-owned property. It's not federally owned property, and we want to make sure that, in particular, defendants, victims, and witnesses are able to pursue justice in the courtroom. You may not be aware of this, but I've seen cases of this, and some testimony and actually more debate yesterday from folks reminding folks that domestic violence victims, are very afraid of seeking help because they're afraid of law enforcement, but also afraid of courthouses. And big surprise, folks, not everybody, a domestic violence victim is not limited to legal status. It can be anybody can become a victim. And so, let's get that out of the way, people. So, it's the importance of creating a safe environment, particularly for victims and witnesses, to be able to get justice, get protection under state law, just like any other resident. If you think it's okay for an abuser to continue to batter someone because they can't, enter the courthouse, please feel free to email Joe. Would love to hear why you think it's okay to allow that to happen. But this is a real conversation about real people. And I talked about earlier, we don't create false hope. This is something that we believe, we have the jurisdiction to do regarding courthouses. I suspect it may be challenged. I think it will be challenged by the federal government. And we'll see how a judiciary responds to the judiciary on something that should be a fundamental right, believe it or not, isn't. Justice should be given from those who crimes have been committed by. We don't touch things like prisoners. If you're already in MCI prison, it's almost 100% collection rate by ICE once they serve the prison sentences. We don't touch any of that stuff. Again, we don't touch judicial warrants. If you have outstanding arrests, they're brought in by police, you're booked normally. The booking automatically goes to the central database anyway that ICE has. Nothing would change regarding pickup time. If ICE doesn't show up on time, they, they're free on bail pursuant to any other resident, right? So all that processes are still there, and those processes are unavoidable because once you book them, it's going to go into the federal database anyway. We post 9/11, we have an integrated system of all states, so some stuff we can't stop, and because it's part of our processes. And it turns out, let's say you're a murderer in another state or a violent felon that pops up on the computer database when they do the booking. Well, obviously, the local police is going to, heighten detention if ICE shows up or not, right? If you're wanted for, vehicular homicide in, Michigan, and you got booked in Massachusetts for OUI, and you pop up, they're going to keep you anyway, because duh, right? But if IC doesn't come get you, well, there's nothing we can do about it if they don't show up. We just book them normally, submit them through bail. Most likely, they won't get bail. And put them in, wait for extradition to Minnesota in that example of vehicular homicide somewhere else. So, that's kind of where we are with that. And we give some judges more flexibility regarding bail, which already have a lot of jurisdiction regarding flight risks, and how to best handle that on a case by case situation because everyone's different. Everyone comes into court for different circumstances. So that's probably the one area I think is probably going to be subject to lawsuit once the judiciary starts to set better ground rules on how to handle civil, not criminal, civil enforcement by ACE.
Okay, all right. So passed the House, right? Is now in the Senate. Is that right?
Yeah, it's in the Senate. We don't know what they're going to do. The governor had a proposal in her supplemental budget. We rejected it in its entirety and went our own direction. We have some other simple highlights in there that I'll just go over quickly. Employers, when they get notice of an ICE raid, inform their employees it's coming and have those I-90, I-9 documents available. For those who don't realize, those are your working papers. There was an incident in Alston regarding detention of workers who were legal and had working papers were detained because they couldn't find those I-9 papers because no one taught them to bring them into work and there was no copies available at the employer. So
Yeah,
we're
that was
trying
the
to
famous
create,
car wash incident there. Yeah.
yeah, we did take notice of that. And we do believe that you should bring your I-9 papers and you should have copies of I-9 papers somewhere with your employer. So we create a situation where employers need to notify the employees, get your paperwork in order. We're going to be subject to an audit.
Okay.
We don't think that's unreasonable because the alternative is actually just disrupting your workplace business.
Yeah, it shut that business down, as I recall, for a short time. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's money. That's a
Hmm.
business not making money. So it's in
Right.
the best interest of businesses, to make sure those working papers are in order and the employees, bring their originals. Make sure, if you want, you probably should have a copy lying in your office someplace.
Hmm.
Because as we discussed at the beginning of this conversation, ICE doesn't care, and that's how it is. We do have some more expansion of UNT visas back to victims in human trafficking and people victims of major crimes. They're here undocumented or expired statuses. UNT visas has been expanded to include more assistance with different law enforcement groups around the state to process these documents. For example, you're in a place like Gardner, Massachusetts, the police force isn't as well equipped as in Boston in case of human trafficking, for example. And the UNT visas provide some temporary protection to the federal government, through state criminal actions against going after the perpetrators against the victims. We can use UNT status with the federal government to protect the victims while pursuing the perpetrators of a case. So, we do some more support services, recognizing that some parts of the states won't have law enforcement that has those technical abilities. So we
Yeah.
provide some expansion of help on that front. Um, we don't touch the issue on restricted locations on private property and certain government property, which is something everyone's clamoring for, and we're all very troubled by that. We actually punt that to the governor to come up with recommendations on how we actually can or cannot prohibit federal agents. Doesn't matter if it's IC, FBI, federal agents in general. How do we stop federal agents from actually entering certain spaces without a warrant or with a warrant? So we kind of punted that issue to the governor's office to kind of help sort out the legalities of that matter.
All right. Well,
It's very
she's a former attorney general, so she can explore that, certainly.
Absolutely. And, we think it requires a lot more thought. As I said earlier, you can't have, city cops sitting in front of your church engage in confrontation with federal law enforcement. It doesn't work. It creates all kinds of new problems. And if you decide as a private citizen to, sue as a private right of action because they knocked down your door and you want damages, that's something you can already do. You hire an attorney, go to federal court and try to recover damages against the federal government for negligence and unjust behavior. So
Mhm.
that mechanism's already in place. The question is, how do you stop? Can you stop, federal agents from actually going onto private property or other government properties, and how do you manage that? And it's much more complicated than people think because, what do you call the city cops? The city cops come over, but the city cops can't do anything
Mhm.
because they can't tell a federal agent not to do something. So what
Right.
does it do for you anyway? Again, false hope. We don't do false hope. So, we also require police locally if they come across ICE. Obviously they can't engage anyway because it creates confrontation. But we're going to require them to document what's going on, so all of us have a better idea what's happening, whether it be body cam or notes. So, we have some transparency here through observation of not just people in the public, but also our own law enforcement agents will provide some
Mhm.
greater clarity for all of us, from different points of view of information, so we have some sense of what's happening when there's an encounter. Um, we do some, as you can tell, we kind of keep it very limited scope here. Um, those are kind of the biggest points. We do some better information collecting folks in county prisons. Um, we want to know who they are, why they're here, what they're brought
Mhm.
in for. We give them the same prisoner rights as everybody, right to a phone call, right to attorney access. If you're in county prison, we actually have some say in the matter because you're in the custody of the state, and you'll be granted the same rights of any other person in custody of the state. We don't think that's unreasonable, but that you should be able to talk to your attorney. We think that's something everybody should have the ability to do in county. We don't change the 287G agreements, which is only one left, really, it's just with the county prisons. And there's only one prison anyway, it's Plymouth. And I give a lot of credit to Chair Cahill and Representative Vargas. They actually visited to inmates at Plymouth and talk to them. And some folks may not understand this, some will, but the families and the people detained rather stay in Massachusetts. And the 287, if we banned everything, that means these folks will be shipped out of state.
Mhm. Mhm. You're talking about people charged with federal offenses, right?
Well, we'll talk about people that have been brought in for civil
Oh,
offense. So if you're brought by ICE for a visa violation, that's a civil
okay.
offense.
Okay.
But they're going to put you in county because there's
Gotcha.
a 287G agreement, which is what they're
In
referring
Plymouth.
to
Okay.
in Plymouth County. So, Chair Cahill and Rep Vargas did go there and had a conversation with families and people in for civil violations. And I know that there's a lot of constituents are asking to get rid of those 287G, but those constituents that email me never once considered, do you want to have your loved one somewhere lost in America, like in Louisiana, that stories we hear, or you rather keep them
Right.
close to home in county?
Well, they probably
And
weren't
county
aware that would be the issue. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, people don't think about other people's feelings when they send me some of these emails, which is part of my frustration here with some of these advocacy groups. So, put yourself in people's shoes. If you ever have a loved one that is whisked away, the ICE has them, and they vanish, then we're no different from a third world country or dictatorship that makes people vanish. If
Hmm.
they're in county prison, we want them to have the same rights as any prisoner in our care, but also the fact that you don't have to create an additional cost to leave the state or go
Hmm.
far, far away to find your loved one. Your attorney's going to be based in Massachusetts more likely than not. You want access to your attorney, the attorney should be close by.
Hmm.
So I do understand that there's a segment of the population asking to eliminate these agreements. You have to consider the people that have been picked up. Don't just think about, well, this is how we get rid of the feds. That is very short sighted and very unfair and actually very not compassionate of you to think about the people that are in custody now and the impact it has on their families.
Right.
So
Right.
no state agency other than that one Plymouth County has an agreement. No law enforcement at the local level and the states whatsoever wants to get involved in this. As we discussed earlier, they can't do anything anyway. They're purely observers. And we set up a provision where no agency in the state can independently engage the federal government. They actually
Hmm.
have to go through the state's Homeland Security Secretariat to explain why they should engage in a 287 agreement with the federal government. So this is kind of our stopgap measure here, where as opposed to putting a put ban, we know we wanted a reasoning and approval by the secretariat before we can do it. And these things are not new; they're very old. So I'll give you maybe a simple example. Let's say there's a federal a drug trafficking ring that is a multi-state, multi-law enforcement investigation. Well, there's a 287G agreement for that one case. So we don't want to create a situation where we box ourselves in that when we have a different presidency, we're going to have to change all laws again. This is actually much more responsible to do a case by case basis through the Secretary of Public Safety's office.
Oh, okay, all right. So do they have to be brought to that Plymouth facility
Yeah,
or they do? Okay.
no, no, they
No.
don't. But it's the one they have an agreement with. It's the closest available one. I'm
Right.
aware there is one in Burlington. The Burlington one is not on public property. It is a private property facility, which makes it
Okay.
impossible for us to enforce prisoner rights in that facility because we
Mhm.
have no control. And yes, they could still take people to other states, which they have done.
Right.
But in civil violations, more times than not, they would prefer to try to keep it local because it's an additional cost to travel and move people
Yep.
around.
Yep.
And if immigration courts could process better, you know, it would create more space in Plymouth, which then creates more opportunity for people to stay here, if they get picked up by ICE.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Wow. It's very involved then. Okay.
Yeah, no, this was very involved, very well thought out, and we have considered legal consequences. And despite a certain segment of the public clamoring of what they want, you know, we actually, again, thanks to Chair Kao and Rep. Vargas, I mean, went to actual people who are directly impacted and talked about what works
Mhm.
best for them.
Yep. Yep. That's what we do in journalism too. Go to the source. Absolutely. Very good.
Yeah, I mean, people who have the most at stake should have the most say.
We have to have a shortened version of the program today, Tack, and I know we always like to talk about international affairs. Your latest take on what's going on in the Middle East.
Well, it's when the he said, she said situation in Middle East. It's very unclear who's in charge of Iran exactly. A lot of people were saying a lot of things out of the country. This doesn't seem to be a complete unified voice. The president's made some of these really cryptic remarks about, big, beautiful gifts and things like that, which I'm not quite sure exactly what that means. But I mean, one of the articles that came out this morning was the fact that, the Iranians are allowing certain ships out, non-hostile ships, particularly India and China, to get some of the oil out. Maybe that was the big beautiful gift. I have no idea.
Hmm.
But I mean, there is a bit of a play. The Iranians also considering becoming a toll road. I've talked about this before with my friends. They're actually trying to put together a plan of whether or not do pay to play for certain ships to be released safely out of there.
Yeah, I
Which
read that too. Yeah, it's like the old robber barons of the medieval times.
sounds very common sense to me if you're in their position. And this could become a wider conflict. The Gulf states are armed. I don't know if you all realize this. This ain't 1985 anymore. These guys are well armed in the Gulf states. If this was 1985, it would be a different conversation of much more less developed areas. And they're trying to contemplate whether they want to engage direct engagement themselves in Iran without U.S. permission.
Right.
That will engage in a larger conflict that will create a larger problem in terms of like loss of lives and also the impact of the world economy. But I mean, as I say before, we start a war, but you and I at home really don't feel it. It's not like you have bombs dropping on our homes. But we start a war, 14 nations residents because they're hitting civilian targets, not hitting military bases. The Iranians are just hitting anything they want, to cause as much damage and fear as possible. Other people are paying the price on our behalf. Think about that, folks. Other people pay the price on our behalf. So, and when I mean just not just property damage or money, we're talking about lives, civilian
Yes.
lives.
Yep.
So, we're kind of waiting to see how it plays out. But I mean, we talked about this with some people in the chamber yesterday. I don't see an off ramp that makes sense for the president. He keeps buckshotting proposals, hoping, marketing ploy the public would accept one of them. Also bucking shot at Iran, hoping Iran would take one of them either. So and I'm sure there's backdoor conversations of countries like Pakistan and others trying to play intermediary. I'm sure notes are being passed and forth, but passing notes isn't a negotiation, unfortunately. So I'm not sure how it's going to play out. All I know is that diesel is $7 in California, which means all our produce is going to go up eventually over time. Because anything we get from that part of Mexico and California is going to have to truck out here.
Mm.
Texas actually has very high diesel prices. Airline tickets, I think you've noticed, 20% more, give or take, depending where you're trying to
Yeah.
get to. They're not waiting for oil, fuel prices to go up. And then, fertilizer, I heard on the news today, the drop dead date on fertilizer export is April 7th in growing seasons for most parts of the world. It sounds like we're okay in the United States. We got our fertilizer earlier because our growing season starts earlier. But I mean, other parts of the world, this could be a real food shortage coming up, which then also drives inflationary prices globally because people are scrambling for food. We saw this of Ukraine war when it didn't affect us, but affected Africa, India, a lot of the country that depends on the wheat and sunflower. And that happened in Ukraine and created inflation in those regions, which then caused economic stress. And of
Mm.
course, helium. Do you know helium was semiconductors? We talked about that last time a
Yeah.
bit, which may have a ripple effect on technology prices if this
Right.
continues the way it is. And that could be a national security issue because chips are kind of important to everything we do in the world. Most, half the planet runs on some kind of chip technology that is crucial. So, including military hardware. And then, yeah, there's a lot. And of course, domestically, he wants $200 billion, I think, to fund this thing further. And, what happened to smaller government, saving taxpayer dollars. And, you already heard that people are getting average 10% more refund and greater on this year's taxes. Now, I don't know who are, but I suspect people at the top end of the food chain is getting bigger tax cuts. But again, how do you, again, it's a very, as I say over again, how do you cut taxes and spend more money? When you can explain that to me, I would like to hear your answer because I certainly don't understand how that works.
It is a conundrum, that's for sure. Yes.
Well, only in politics you lack that common sense. I'm gonna cut revenue and spend more. It's the only thing I've learned in my 30 years in politics, spending time with a lot of people and talking to people. It is the one thing I've noticed is the common thread. I want to spend more because I like these types of services, but I don't want to pay taxes.
Mm, mm.
My favorite is also public employees. They also don't believe in taxes sometimes, and I look at them like, "Well, you don't want a job, huh?"
Just lay it right out there for them, Jackie. Hold no
I
bars.
just again, this is what I call very common sense. I don't I again I think common sense is something as simple as that. I think people think common sense is like complex public policy issue. I just think it's much simpler than that. Um, as you can tell, I talk to a lot of folks in my life, and I just get a lot of like head scratches by the time I'm done.
Has budget discussion started on Beacon Hill yet?
Ways and Means hearings are continuing. Joint Ways and Means Committee hearings are continuing. House Ways and Means continues to meet with individual reps on their requests. I've already done my meeting as well as the House Asian Caucus meeting request. You've been reminded again, it could be a very strange and tight budget because the federal government is peeling back and we're not sure if we want to actually supplement. As I talked about last week, once we put money into a federal program, the federal government isn't inclined to want to give us back any money
Mm,
because they feel like, oh, well, you've done the work. Well, why should we put money in? So, I
hmm
mean,
hmm
it's a very perilous situation if you start replacing federal programs that we know could be restored into a different administration. Well, more likely than not, probably will be. But we're paying for the freight. Your tax dollars are paying for the freight. Why would federal tax dollars want to go in? So, I think there's going to be a very delicate balancing act here in this year's budget. Addressing federal cuts and programs, and um, we talk about mass health all the time. It's over 30% of the budget, and a lot of people depend on mass health, particularly Medicare, Medicaid, and over 70% of mass health budget is people over the age of 65.
hmm
They're the ones that eat the most of the budget, and any kind of reduction in those programs on the federal level, we're going to have to make some hard choices how we're going to address that, whether we're reducing services for certain demographics, or try to do some, increase in order to Reduce costs in certain services with certain demographics in order to make up those costs for those with higher need. Those are ugly decisions to make in government, and there's a chance those are going to be very bad decisions we're going to make in our level.
Right, right. Have you seen any impact on the revenues from the lottery lately?
Revenue lottery isn't as great as it has been. I haven't looked
Yeah.
at the latest numbers, but it is a little bit stagnated, and it's a reflection of a slowing economy. And also,
Mm,
we haven't had a good Powerball in a while. A lot of the
mm.
big spikes in the lottery is driven by the multi-state lottery, especially in Powerball. And when as I still can't go into the fact that no one buys a ticket until you um, close in on like $1 billion.
I
I
know
mean,
when
remember
your
the days?
odds are the worst, right? I know.
Yeah, the days it was like $750,000 closing on the million. We got to buy a ticket as it closes on a million. Nowadays, no one wants to buy a ticket that closes on $1 billion. The casual players. So, well, it's worth monitoring that situation. Alcohol and car excise tax need to be monitored as well.
Mm,
Those are indications of a slowing economy. People are not purchasing alcohol and not buying cars. And I know cars are super expensive still. And of course, the meals tax and use tax are also a question as well. It gives that a sense of economic movement. However, the summertime could be a very good boon for certain parts of the state regarding the World Cup coming, regarding the tall ships coming, the 250th anniversary celebration, especially around July 4th. There is going to be a high level of tourist activity coming in. Um, some of it from overseas, such as the World Cup. Some are very domestic, like the 250th anniversary.
right. Yeah. Although some of it might be tempered with the high fuel prices. We'll see. Yeah.
And I told you guys before, the federal government's increased visa prices significantly for an individual family. So I mean,
Mm,
$250 more on a visa could impact foreign folks coming here to spend their money on local services and food and goods. So maybe they pass up on that one more souvenir. Maybe they don't get that one more beer because it took them so much more money to get here. So you got fuel costs plus higher visa costs. Could create some stress on other folks coming here to spend the money. And the U.S. dollar's getting stronger again. Gold's going down because of the Middle East crisis. So
right.
if the dollar index continues to rise, particularly against the euro, because we're expecting a lot of people from Europe to come, the euro, the dollar, their money won't stretch as far. They're going to, save. Conversely, we may not get many people from Latin America. The current political climate, plus the way they've been treating many folks from that region of the world, maybe actually reduce the number of tourists from Latin America,
Mm, yeah.
which is in those who watch soccer, football, which I don't, know that fan base is rabid and they will follow the fan base and they'll bring money with them.
Right. Yeah. A lot of variables for sure.
Yeah, I think there's a match coming up soon, exposition match, I think coming up in next
Yes.
week.
It's
So
this
that be
afternoon, actually.
is it that could be a good gauge in viewership and attendance, because a lot of local folks will go to that.
Hmm.
Pride in your team. We're Boston, Massachusetts people. We understand the importance of pride in your team.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that could
Yeah. France and Brazil are playing this afternoon.
yeah. So that should be interesting to see how the attendance goes and the news reports afterwards about how people are feeling.
Right. How's the unemployment situation? I always like to talk about that.
I haven't seen the latest numbers. Weekly job claims on a federal level. I think that number actually came out I think it's next week. Um, and the JOLTS will come out next week. So
Hmm.
we'll get a better sense then. I mean, it is ticking up. Um, People locally will tell you this too. People aren't hiring. You got this really unfortunate situation where people aren't hiring and people aren't migrating as much as they did between jobs 2 years ago. So, we don't want to see no new hires. And the fact GDP in the last quarter was revised down by nearly half, is a sign that something's wrong with a slow economy. You can blame the federal government shutdown. However, you can't. That's a lot to be shaved by 50% in the last GDP number. That is not purely because of federal shutdown. I mean,
Mm,
we just talk about things like higher prices from fuel and other stuff, and how that's going to impact people's spending on vacation. We'd love to hear, you know, oh, record-breaking travel at the airport or on the roads. Well, that's
right.
great. However, are they spending money in the destination, whether it be in Massachusetts or other part of the country? where are those dollars at their destination? Well, how much are they using? How much are they using the spending power? So
Right.
that will have a direct impact on things like unemployment. And seasonal workers are starting up on the Cape, in particular. That's coming up in 2 months. And whether they actually can get seasonal workers, many of which actually are foreign visa workers. People don't realize that. And again, I mean, we spent all this money on gasoline and airfare. You know, can you spend more money at your destination? That's actually the more interesting statistic. And then if you're stagflated in jobs, there's no new jobs to be had, or you lost your job. Well, you may go on vacation still, but you probably again, how much you're going to spend at your destination.
Right, right. Yep. It's a trickle down effect for sure. What's going on in the district? Anything we should know about?
Let's see here. There's no King's Rally. Be thinking probably the third or fourth one coming up this Saturday, 11 o'clock at Quincy City Hall. The right to express your opinion is still very important in this country. It also puts it on the front burner to remind everybody that some issues have not gone away. People may wish they were gone, but they're not. And I think it's still going to be very important for people to express their thoughts and opinions in a safe environment. Um, and Massachusetts is a very civil place. We're not like other states. Um, Historically, we really don't have a lot of problems. But because we don't, it makes it easier for everybody to actually want to participate in expressing their opinion. Uh, it doesn't matter if I agree or disagree with your opinion. We want a safe environment for you to express it. Actually, I'll be at Brandeis University on Sunday night. I got invited to an AAPI leadership forum. Still not entirely clear the details of what I'm talking about, but I'll figure it out when I get there.
I'm
But
sure.
actually, that's going to be actually my entire Saturday evening is going to be consumed by that. Um, the Democratic City Committee is having their reorganizational meeting on, I believe, the 2 Thursdays from now. So it'll be like the 9th of um, August in the evening. It'll be like after work.
April, you
Um,
mean?
yeah, I'm sorry, April. It'll
Yeah.
be after the after work on April 9th at the Dick Koch Center, the Parks Department on
hmm
Fairmount Way. So that they got that going on. If you're a Democrat, wants the city committee, we just want to come say hi. That's what we'll be. I'm trying to think of other events going on locally. The State House, I got Broad Meadows Middle School coming in tomorrow, so I'll be talking to students and um, answering their questions for an hour or so. So I'll be,
Oh, that'll be fun.
people, yeah, people. We do actually show up on Fridays, and student government days the week after that. I'm not actually sure which students from Quincy High School and North Quincy High School are coming yet. I've not gotten the list.
Okay.
Um, they often participate. I've actually had some interns come out of that from that group, which were great. And
Nice.
actually also have a Harvard Kennedy School group coming in to talk about world affairs as well next Friday. Yeah, I do show up at the State House Friday, everybody. It does actually happen. It is my district day. I do take a lot of meetings in coffee shops on Fridays, but not this time, not in the next 2 weeks. And then,
Nice.
there's also Anime Boston for those who
Hmm.
speaking of tourism money, Anime Boston is actually 30,000 people at the Heinz Convention Center Easter weekend. So if you're into that kind of hobby and you like science fiction and anime and comic books and whatnot, I mean, there'll be another test to see what people's disposable income is like that weekend.
Right, right. Okay, so plenty going on, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have to cut it short this week, Techie, again, unfortunately, but that doesn't mean folks can't reach out to you, right?
Oh, absolutely. I know this is a bit short. We crammed a lot of information in a short period of time. Obviously, you can reach me at 617-722-2370, 617-722-2370. It's an automated system if the front desk people are not picking up at the time. So be patient, go through the automated system. It is not my office. I am not headed to suite. So if you're finding people, and again, I've been informed by other folks having challenges reaching me by telephone. Tackey.chan at mhouse.gov, Tackey, SHN@mahouse.gov. That's the email. I do check my email. My staff checks my email. We all look at the email, and we obviously prioritize constituent service first. We had, for example, we had a person come in, a public employee that's retired, trying to figure out how to use the 457 program regarding the retirement. We, direct them to the treasurer's office to help them find some better customer service. Believe it or not, that's the kind of stuff calls we get, right? We talk about a lot of unemployment and problems with R&B, problems with people's professional licenses, but something simple as that, trying to get some help to the right customer service person, we'll do our best to connect you to the right folks. So there's an example. Facebook, State Representative Tackey Chan. We have a corresponding Instagram. You can see some photos of me this week. And also we actually put a report up in the summary about stuff I've done in my own committee. So you can get a sense about how many hearings, how many bills, a few bills that we highlight. Definitely check it out. It's in a graphic format. It's designed for you to look at it in 10 seconds because that's the world we're living in. We do have Tackey Chan at org, strictly an informational page. Feel free if you need to find a phone number. We do have MA Legislature.gov, MA State Legislature's website. Go over there. You can find debate from yesterday. You want to see debates yesterday? They're recorded for your streaming purposes to enjoy watching basically 4 hours of debate. Actually, it was a pretty good debate. And of course, I'm here with Joe, and Joe's in the morning for 10 minutes at a time, giving some quick updates. And again, Joe's waiting to hear your email. So QATV at QATV.org, QATV at QATV.org. Joe's waiting for his first one, so maybe it could be you.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from folks. Absolutely. All right, we'll let you drive on to your next appointment, Tackey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. Talk to you next week.